Get Rich Education is brought to you by International Coffee Farms. Own your very own parcel of a Panama coffee farm today.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Welcome to Get Rich Education, episode 37. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Thanks for investing your time here today. It's the show where I want to make you more successful than me, faster than me. You know, I often talk about playing a game worth winning. That's why I say do the right thing first, and only then do you concern yourself with doing things right. Well, it's easy to make a case for real estate as that right thing because it serves a basic human need. That need or demand is going to continue to increase. And how do we know that that demand will increase for what we're providing? Well, for one thing, the United States population is increasing by more than 2 million people every year, and they all need a place to live, and you're the ones serving them. Well, one thing that means is that new construction real estate must occur to keep up and continue to meet that growing demand. Now, we talk about markets on this show a lot, so we're aware that those extra 2 million plus people every year, they're not distributed across the nation or the world evenly. And that's why finding the sustainable markets that are attracting people and jobs is even more important than the property itself. But of course, the property itself that you're buying is still important, and the more utility that the property has, the more underlying demand should continue to be there. So we're going to talk about real estate development today. And developers need to shift their practices to meet human desires and even reflect social trends that are always changing. I mean, just look back historically at some of the home trends that have changed throughout time. I mean, back in, say, 1930, there were few homes built with garages at all. For much of America's history, even a big 4, 5, 6 bedroom home might only have one bathroom, and it might be inconveniently located upstairs on a hallway. I mean, that's how they used to build. In 1970, homes weren't built with like an ensuite bathroom off a master bedroom. Now, it's been standard for a while now. It functions better because it affords residents more privacy, so it better meets that basic human need. In maybe 1995, you had like these brass doorknobs and fixtures. That was kind of the thing. And then it moved on to brushed nickel and whatever it is now. It seems like that one's always changing. Think about the growing concern over safety in the last decade or two and how that changes how homes are constructed. I mean, today people want larger, upgraded kitchens with these quartz or polished concrete countertops. And there might be fewer formal dining rooms constructed than there had been previously. Look at our aging population and how that's reflected in home construction. Ranch-style homes have become more popular than they have been in the recent past. What about millennials? What do they want? I mean, they're okay a lot of times with a smaller living space, but they often prefer to rent an apartment building that has a big common area. So these human preferences are just increasingly dynamic. Consider that 100 or so years ago, the advent of elevators and construction cranes allowed for new building styles themselves. I mean, steel and concrete, they weren't even employed as building materials for most of human history here. So looking ahead now, I've talked on this show quite a bit about how autonomous cars and the sharing economy can minimize the need for parking space at an apartment building. And if that manifests itself, then a property can look more serene because you can build it such that there's more space for green grass and landscaping. So developers are often trying to analyze the trends so that when they build, it can have maximum appeal and utility throughout its life cycle. When a developer builds anew in a community, they really are building a part of that community. I mean, you really are building part of a city and an economy. And a lot of interests come into play when you're changing a use from vacant land to an improved property, or even if you're repurposing an existing property. You have a stake in that community and their elected representatives, and they have a stake in you. And you want to find out what the local community's problems are and then help solve it for them. I mean, just like the key to successful negotiating is finding out what the other party really wants from a deal and finding a way to give it to them. I mean, the same really goes for appeasing stakeholders in an existing community. You know, like I've said before, lead by giving. Give to the community and you will in turn get more of what you want ultimately. On a macro scale, you also may want to serve an entire area where its future is bigger than its past. And more Americans than ever are retiring outside the United States. And one of those places, for a lot of reasons, is the Central American nation of Belize. There's a lot of opportunity on Ambergris Caye. That's Belize's largest island. In fact, I bought property there a few years ago to seize upon that opportunity. And my guest and I are going to touch on that a little bit today, too. You know, the highest end real estate event that I know of in the entire world is the Real Estate Guys Investor Summit at Sea, and the faculty on the summit are true elites. Today's guest is part of that faculty, and I'm registered to be on that next summit, which is next February. So after I attend that, of course, I'm going to give you all the great takeaways from there. And by the way, you can see all the events GRE is attending on the events tab at getricheducation.com. So maybe we can meet you in person there. Well, I've learned about real estate investing from today's guest. So let's get into this because I'm sure you'll learn something too. Hey, well, I'd like to welcome on our next guest. I haven't been this excited about a guest in quite a while. Our next guest is both the president and principal of an international real estate development company. She's a serial entrepreneur. She has experience on Wall Street. She's been the CEO of a software development company, the business strategy leader of a Fortune 50 company, and she's a formally trained economist. She has such a valuable, eclectic mix of experience. She assembles, motivates, and brings out the best in large teams like few know how to. I love listening to hear her speak live. She's such a passionate speaker about real estate investing, entrepreneurship, real estate development, and a ton of other related things. And, you know, her knowledge and passion as a speaker really shows, and so does her central commitment to a mission. I mean, when I go to an event and I see this person's name listed in the roster or the lineup of speakers, I want to be sure I'm not out in the hallway for even a minute. She really leaves an impression on people. You know, she says that the tougher the problem is, the more interest that she actually has in solving it. I first had the privilege of meeting her a few years ago when my wife and I visited the beautiful Central American nation of Belize. You know, to make me better, I want to hang out with the smartest people that I can find. That's why today I'm grateful to have Beth Clifford with us. Welcome to Get Rich Education, Beth Clifford.
How are you doing, Keith?
Hey, great. It's a nice day here. Hey, Beth, one really important part of doing all this is thinking and acting big. Big thoughts lead to big actions. Big actions lead to big patterns, and big patterns lead to really a big life. I mean, what can you advise someone on thinking and acting big? What could you tell them?
Keith, for me, it comes down to probably two things. One is to understand where my fears lie and to turn them off, and to understand why and how my potential anxiety or fears limit what I think I'm capable of doing when I am able to put the right teams together. So one is to manage myself. The second one, which I think is just critical to thinking big, is you have to never stop learning. And very much, I keep in my calendar, my private time is where I protect. Probably the most ruthless of anything on my calendar is my time for me to develop me and to be open and to read. I read over 150 books a year. I am voracious in podcasts. I listen to you every week, Keith.
Thank you.
I listen to probably, if I go to my iPhone, I probably have 60 podcasts that I am listening to continuously. So if you ask me what the Kardashians are doing, I have no idea. But I do know what Elon Musk is up to. You have to just stay on top and listen and be open to new ideas and ask yourself the question about how do I merge that into the things that I dream about and where I would love to go in my life, where I see the possibility. I'm an optimistic person, and I believe in the best for people. I believe in bringing out the best in communities, the best in people that I meet. That's what keeps me alive. And so I look at how do I go find those new technologies, those new people. I'll call anybody. I've called Elon Musk, ask him how I can get involved.
Great.
Don't let your fears limit you. You're too valuable. Each person is too valuable to sit on the sidelines.
I've told my listeners you own a multi-billion-dollar asset, and that's your mind. Everyone listening to this...
Go ahead, Keith. I loved that podcast that you did. I thought that was brilliant.
Hey, thank you. Everyone listening to this right now is a human, just like Beth Clifford, and she has the audacity to do it. But it's too bad. I was going to ask you what's going on with the Kardashians. That's my next question. I'll just cross that off. All right, we won't get into that this time. Next time.
Next time, I'll have to study up on that one because I honestly don't know.
Well, Beth, I think that one often wonders, why would you go develop a piece of land when there's already so many pieces of land that have an existing structure on it that might already be fully occupied? Isn't it better to just invest in that? So why develop?
Wow, that's a big question, Keith. Number of things that happen is you spoke in my intro, which is I'm an entrepreneur. And one of the ways that you are able to truly meet a new market and a new demand is for you to start as a greenfield developer. And we're currently doing greenfield developments in the Caribbean and in the greater metro DC area, where we're able to, rather than doing infill and one-offs of what a market already has, we're able to assemble new pieces of land, put them together, and come up with a whole different business model, different product to a different potential customer with different price points that we can really set a trend in real estate. And so that's one of the things that I find interesting to go do as a developer. And the net of it is, one is a new market, new product to a different customer, different price points. And it's exciting because I see that the real estate is not a static industry. The markets keep changing. So one of the best ways to address that is being able to be a real greenfield developer.
Greenfield meaning starting from scratch, making something out of nothing?
Absolutely. So yes, greenfield means you're starting with a raw piece of land, looking at it in the context of the area that it's in. So am I in a suburban area, urban, resort, understanding that individual special piece of land and then imagining how will that specific piece of raw land get translated into the vision that you have for an end product which goes to the consumer.
Now, it seems to me, though, if you develop anew, there's just so much more that you have to figure out rather than just buying something existing like, planning and zoning. Maybe you want to know even more about the demographics. How's it going to work with the utilities? What's the tax structure like? Do I have to get a construction loan now? So why confront all those problems? Is there a better return there, Beth?
There's a better return and there's higher risk. And so that's why people go forward and do development. When you're able to there's so many different ways to do it. Number one is when you're buying a piece of land, you could be buying it where it is underdeveloped or underzoned. You can force equity into the project by taking it from raw land into a special zoning, where you can then increase the margin on the land itself. Then you also, because you're mixing together your own cost of construction, all of those costs you own as at your own raw cost, as opposed to buying somebody else's cost and adding on to it. So you're really able to manage all of your costs all the way through to the end product. Now, after the collapse in 2006, 2007, there was a lot of property that was available on the market that was below replacement costs. And so many developers would say, well, why develop when you can actually buy below replacement costs? And I would certainly agree with them.
Right.
Another, though, is that when you're looking to go really establish a new product. And I think you've heard me speak before, Keith, where I get excited, which is when you find really great niche markets and where you can find upside and higher margin product. You can do that by understanding your customer and delivering a product specific to their needs, which typically can have a higher profit margin than just a generic product.
All right, that probably makes a little sense to me. You know, a 30-year-old building, a 20-year-old building, maybe even a 10-year-old building just might not have the amenities that a certain demographic wants these days, and you can probably serve that better when you develop what demand is requesting.
You know, one of the people that I love to watch, Keith, are you familiar with the company called WeWork?
I can't say that I am, actually, no.
What I love them, and I would encourage your listeners, WeWork.com, WeWork. And what they do is they take over commercial office space and turn it into collaborative workspace. And what they're doing is taking a very specific asset class, but reworking it with a service type service on top of it, on top of real estate, and are creating one of the highest margin real estate offerings that is currently in the market today. Their market cap, I believe, is at $5 billion today. And they actually don't own any real estate other than leases on existing products. So that's what I find interesting, particularly if you're going to go into the reuse. They're not a classic developer, but interesting in that they went and they found a market niche, which is millennials in the share economy that want to live and work together. And they took a asset class, which was raw commercial space, finished it out with tenant improvements, and then added a service level. And they're actually, when you do their numbers on what they're getting for office rent, is about 4 times the current office rent that classic office rent is going for.
Because they identified a need, and then rather than redeveloping, they may be repurposed.
They did. And so what they understood, they started with the customer first, which is where we start. We start with the customer and say, where is the customer? Where is the highest demand for that customer, and where are they not getting served? For instance, we're doing a project here in the DC area, which is a process that's going to have a piece like with WeWork in it, but it's a share economy millennial product for people in DC. Now, in DC, one of the issues is I am developing in the most expensive county in the country. And the average price for single-family residence is about $600,000. Well, how many millennials can afford a $600,000 house?
Exactly.
Very
zero.
few.
Yeah.
Almost, correct? So one of the burning needs is that you've got the baby boomers and beyond parents who are sitting there looking at it and saying, my children will never be able to own a property where I live. We are going backwards and actually doing small houses with shared workspace in an urban core, which has a totally different look and feel than your typical multifamily, which is, the 800 square foot 1 bedroom, the 1,000 square foot 2 bedroom. We're completely rethinking about how do we go deliver a solution at the right cost to the right customer, but still maintain an integrity of a good margin.
Yeah, I've got to say, that's probably a lot more forward-looking than what most buy and hold real estate investors of an existing building do. They look at an APOD, the annual property operating data, maybe a few years tax returns from the seller that they're going to go ahead and buy it from, and they're always looking back. This way it looks forward, and you're probably able to ensure that you're going to have better demand that way when you think about the customer, that tenant first.
It is, and we're able to size the product appropriately. We're able to, for instance, in this one, it's an urban area. Now, it's a lot more difficult also because, here we are in an urban area. We're doing a smaller product where we're having some common amenities where the workspace, your share space, your common areas are larger. Your individual footprint for the personal use component in that property is smaller, but we've also negotiated with the town for them to relax their parking requirements because there's going to be zip cars and electric bikes, which then allowed us not to have 2 parking spaces. In order to meet the customer demand, deliver it at a price point that makes sense, it also necessitates us to fight against some of the things that are already in the market, which is specific zoning that inflates products. So it's a lot of hard work, but at the end of the day, we will have a very, very unique product that will be able to be delivered to a niche market at a price that they can afford.
As a developer, what do you really spend most of your time doing?
One, it always starts with the customer. What does the customer currently have, and where's the customer going? It's back to the Wayne Gretzky. He was successful because he went where the puck was going, not where the puck was.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time looking at the markets themselves. What is the demand that we see on the horizon for the next 10 years in those markets? Just like Kenny McElroy and others who are just brilliant in multifamily, we're looking at making sure that there's a good workforce housing and there's jobs in the area. What is the need that's not being addressed? And we try to find those niche markets. And so, number one, we do an incredible amount of time and effort in understanding who our customer is, what they want to spend. We do a lot of projections also as far as financial, because where are the financial markets going? It's obviously just a crystal ball. I don't know where they're going, but to try to understand what the availability of funds are and how is our customer going to be able to afford our product. But then the third part is it's all about team for me, Keith. It's all about, number one, coming up with a vision and then understanding what that core vision is, what we're going to deliver, and then putting the team together that understands that brilliant focus that we're going after. To me, it's all about building a great team, and that means it's government officials, it is local people, it is my neighborhood people, it's the customer, it's the contractors, it's the lawyers, designers, you name it. It's everybody coming together to understand what we're facilitating and understanding what barriers that we need to knock down in order to make it a successful project that we can bring in on budget. And then ultimately, I'm always looking for win-win, Keith. I'm a win-win developer. I look for, how do I make the town succeed? How do I bring jobs? How do I make the local businesses succeed? Because I'll be bringing residences in. So it's really always looking at it as solving the problems for all the people that are stakeholders in the project and leading to them to where they want to be a participant.
Yeah, there's really probably more of an element of altruism or giving back to this than just a typical buy and hold investor. If I buy a 10-plex building from somebody that just sold it to me, I'm probably, I want to make the place clean, safe, affordable, and functional for tenants, but I'm also looking at those investor metrics, and I'm probably not having as much of an impression on improving a town or community as you are when you go in with a new greenfield development. So you're really transforming a town or a jurisdiction. I mean, how do you get those relationships at the highest level, say, with a mayor or with a representative? How does that work? How do you infiltrate, I guess?
I tell people that mine is I go into every meeting, number one, prepared to understand what the mayor or the local people are looking for. What's the itch that they're trying to scratch? These local officials have so much that they've got to take care of. They've got a constituency that has so many different needs, whether it's education, crime, safety, growth, finances. I have great empathy for the people who are in public service. And so I always start out with, number one, researching and understanding what are the top 3 to 5 things that are keeping them awake at night. I then work and try to understand how I can be a good resource for them to knock at least 1 or 2 of those off of their list. And if I could show a way that, like currently I'm working with one area where we just donated vehicles because they were having some issues in the police department and were underfunded, we donated vehicles. Another place we're working with has an issue with trash. And so we're bringing big bellies and technology to a jurisdiction to help them do education and how do they transform their community so that they have less litter. And we're like, well, how about if we were to go actually, help you develop a trash program? So I always go in trying to understand how I can help solve a problem. And then on that side, then I feel like I have the opportunity to earn the opportunity to ask them for some assistance on my side. And then it's always about the two parties meeting in the middle of the field as opposed to meeting just on my side. I never play win-lose.
Gosh, those are some great actionable examples because they say with successful negotiation, you're going to negotiate best if you know what the other party wants, whether someone's selling you a building or whether that's a mayor of a town for redevelopment. So what you're doing is you're finding out what they want, and you're just going ahead and secondly, just helping solve it for them.
Absolutely. Ultimately, again, as a developer, we have certain markets that we believe we will be in for 10 to 20 years. So that is very different than a developer who comes in, finds one piece of land, and literally can do almost a burn the ground kind of strategy where they come in, get all the money they possibly can, and they're never going to go build again. I have done 7 projects in the DC area. I live here. I am a member of this community. I'm on boards of companies here. I'm a stakeholder in this community. And so I'm not going to do a slash and burn type of development here. This is my backyard, my reputation. I, as a developer, have only one reputation. And it takes 10 or 20 years to earn your reputation, but you can lose it in 30 minutes if you want to.
It's so fragile. Yeah.
It really is. And so the point is, if you play well, you're never going to win everything. And you shouldn't, right? I mean, so by definition, if you're a win-win player, I'm not going to get everything I want. What I would rather do is find a good crossover of our Venn diagrams of everybody coming to the problem together, everybody getting a piece of their problem solved, and that we can go forward and at the end of the project not look at each other and want to walk away from each other, but that we want to go do 4 more projects together.
And all these notions sound great and really sound like good things for almost everyone involved. But, to get a development project together, the funding has got to come from somewhere. I mean, for a lot of these development projects, can you just go out and get one big construction loan from a bank and be done? Or do you have to find individual investors? Or what's your capital stack look like for some of these deals?
Varies by project. The most typical way that we will fund our projects is, I like to call them ABC funding on the capital stacks. A to me is the angel round. And angel means the developer coming in and doing the very initial due diligence. Going into the market, is this market feasible? What should the product type look like? What's the opportunity? And potentially getting into contract and tying up land at that point or properties in order for them to do the due diligence, in order for them to go forward. So those typically are funded in-house by our development companies. We'll take the initial round. Then what we do is we then typically secure other people's money and invite syndication and syndicate the next round once we have a better understanding of exactly what the opportunity is. And that can vary. That can, as far as the size of the capital stack is. And then C is then to look at what is going to be the final debt. Typically it will be debt, which will then take out the rest of the project. So again, we look at it as A being initial seed capital to get us to feasibility, the B round to get us to contract and get us to vertical, and then typically the C round will be a debt round. And all of those are different. It depends on the size of the project, how much money we need, and who do we go after it with. I mean, we've got some projects that are 100% debt finance, where we went right from A to 100% debt financing because it was available. We've had others where we've had 1A, a B round, and then C rounds.
And how does that work? And I guess what does it mean that you say you have the debt takeout at the end in some cases? What does that mean?
So typically, in Greenfield, we will do typically 2 things. So we take the A, we take the B, which is the equity investors, which gives us the equity to loan to value that our debt partner will be looking for. So they will then fund the development for us or to go vertical. And then normally we will either use that same debt partner to fund it when it goes to retail when we're doing single family residences. So we like to see that same debt partner also participate. If it's not going to stay in our portfolio, if it's a retail product, then we like to see them to stay also on the other end, which is when our end user comes in and does the takeout financing.
So for development real estate, We've had quite a pendulum swing in the lending environment for residential and some commercial loans over the past 10 years. Very loose 10 years ago and very tight today. So for development real estate, is it sort of the same way, or how does that look?
There are markets where there is too much money chasing too many deals, where today there's literally 100% money available in certain markets. So the capital that is available over the last 8 years has changed drastically, Keith, where 8 years ago, loan to values, you were lucky to get a 60% loan to value if you could even get a bank to even talk to you. Today, I've got banks who are sitting and saying, we'll do 100% financing. We'll do 100% financing on greenfield developments. We'll do 100% takeout financing on some capital that we currently own, on cash flow commercial product that we have that are looking to do 100%. So I've seen a very drastic change in lending. So it's makes you a little bit nervous as a developer when you see it's a little bit like it was in 2005, 2006 right now in some of the markets with the banks.
Wow, because that pendulum really hasn't swung back for your residential Fannie Freddie loans for rental properties.
And I joke with the banks because, I personally own real estate myself. Just recently bought a single family residence, and the amount of due diligence that they did in order to underwrite my jumbo loan was about 10 times what they did for a development project that was 20 times the lending amount.
Wow.
And I said, it's interesting. I said, I've never had so much due diligence. But you sign on the back of your bank, you sign a term sheet with me, basically when I just show you 3 pieces of paper. But it's interesting. But that's just different. That's a different set of lending requirements.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I'm really glad that I know that. It sounds like that's where some opportunity might be, because I talk to my audience a lot about how you probably want to be in smart debt, get a good loan, use leverage, and it sounds like there's a greater leverage opportunity with development than there is with residential right now based on that.
There is.
You're listening to Get Rich Education. My guest is international real estate developer Beth Clifford. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Through Get Rich Education and International Coffee Farms, you can own your own half-acre parcels of a passive income-generating coffee farm in Panama for as little as $12,000. It's a low-risk opportunity with an average annual return projected to be 13 to 15%. The farms are professionally managed for you on a turnkey basis, and you own the land. And you can give as well as receive by helping international coffee farms create good jobs that pay a living wage and provide medical, pension, and other benefits to very poor Panamanian coffee farm workers and their families, often for the first time in their lives.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education with our guest, international real estate developer Beth Clifford. So, Beth, it sounds like we've identified some opportunity here. What real estate sectors really have the best opportunity for real estate investors, whether that be development or otherwise, as far as developing for hotel or leisure and hospitality, corporate housing, a resort? So, really, where's the lowest hanging fruit so a listener could take advantage of this?
Not unlike many of the developers, is we follow demographic trends, where the jobs are going, and where housing is going to be required. And so I will always go back that residential is a great market to be in. Understand who your client is, who's moving into and what jobs are moving into the area. So you understand what the salary ranges are. How long do people stay in that area? Is it better to have, are you selling retail, single family residences? Should you be in the multifamily area? But, going through residential is always a great area to be involved in. We have been doing some medical office and smaller medical office because it's an industry that's in a lot of turmoil, as with all of the Affordable Care Act that's been going on. and how medical office is working has been very much changing. But there's been a very interesting market of the smaller clinic size offshoot products that need to be near larger hotels that we've been looking at doing. And so we've got a couple of those that are under development. We're also doing some educational products here in the DC area. There's 2 private educational projects that we're in due diligence on right now, and that there's a large demand in this area to, with the inflow of people that are coming in. The public schools are overflowing, the private schools are overflowing, and so there's a real need to either repurpose existing product and or greenfield some specialty education. So we're doing that as well. Currently not doing much in the retail or specific office sector, just only in the niche of the medical as far as office goes. And then the third is one of the bigger markets that we're going after is travel and leisure. And we've been spending quite a bit of time on that, but that has not been in the United States. That's been developing outside of the United States. And so we see that as another interesting place, because that's not only travel and leisure, but that's following where the baby boomers are moving as they continue to retire and continue to move from snow areas and move into the warm, sunny areas.
Yeah, I think I want to ask you more about that shortly. I think backing up first, we talk about skating where the hockey puck's going. You mentioned medical. That's probably a really smart place to go. But having this demographic vision, with it being so important and with the rate of technological change being adopted faster than ever, I just wondered how one stays in front of that. Like 10 years ago, I don't know that anyone could have seen Airbnb potentially undercutting hotel stays as much as it has, or the advent of Uber, or the prospect of driverless cars, autonomous cars coming up, changing parking configurations for places. How do you have that vision to stay on top of these so you know what kind of development is going to be sustainable in 10 years and 20 years? How do you do that?
Well, I don't know. That's a great question. If anybody knew that, then you should definitely get them on your show, Keith. There was rumblings probably over 10 years ago about where the share economy was going to come. And many people really didn't look at it and say that that was a viable option. But if you look at it today, and if you're not thinking about where technology is going to go, then you're not looking in the right place. You should be watching whatever Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are doing. Like you asked me about a book. Here's one, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel is a must-read book. Good but one. It's about what is going on. A share economy is absolutely happening. Artificial intelligence is happening. The revolution of technology taking away jobs is absolutely happening. I was just reading today about how I believe it's Walgreens. It's either Walgreens or CVS is going to be starting to set up virtual medical centers. And so you had better be thinking about it. And then 3D printing on top of all of that and driverless cars. I think the answer is going to be a lot of people moving back into urban cores, people moving into smaller places in urban cores. It's drastically going to change what's going on. You're going to see more and more, I believe, like the company no longer owns its corporate resources anymore, and its corporate offices, but they're renting out of parts of WeWork instead because they don't want the expense and the capital expense on their books any longer. And people are going to be moving from fixed costs to variable costs. So how do you, as a developer, start to create markets and real estate product that allows for people to have flexible leases and to be leasing versus owning product?
So with that in mind, is part of being a savvy developer building something with a mind that when you're building it, you're thinking, can this be repurposed? Yep,
absolutely. So, I mean, like, for instance, we were looking originally, one of the projects we're working on is a small urban center. And in that, there's a certain core of it that is to the baby boomers. Baby boomers still like to own property, but millennials don't like to own property. So how do you go put together people who are owning property and not owning property and putting them together in the same kind of an environment? And how do you then create all of the amenities about creating a great community? Personally, I think that's where the puck is going. is people want to be moving back into urban cores. People want to be part of a community again. And the more and more that we have our own communities of interest, which is what I call our iPhones, because, my iPhone, my Facebook is with my community of interest people and my site and all of my bookmarks. Well, those are all things that I've selected, and I've created my own community of friends aligned my communities of interest. But what I'm also craving is to get away from the things that I already know and the people I know already who are part of that interest. And I want to be out and meeting people who are outside of that area. And I think that's why we'll see a lot more interest and a lot more people coming back into the urban core, wanting to be able to mix it up with people that are outside of their own demographics.
Yeah, now we've been talking a little bit about demographic shifts within a submarket and within a market, maybe even within a nation, but you mentioned a little bit the trend of a lot of Americans, increasingly when they want to retire, they're leaving the United States. What are you doing to help fill that need?
Number one, I think after the last recession, a number of people who are retiring are going to have to work. So the number of people who are just going to retire and sit on their porch has drastically changed. Most baby boomers want to continue to do some amount of work during their retirement and or be giving back, whatever. They want to be working in nonprofits or charities or something. So what we have been looking at is where do we go build in a place that has a good work environment, that is close in proximity to the United States, that shares time zones with the United States, that has good shipping lanes, has good access to infrastructure, et cetera. And so we've been building in the Caribbean country of Belize. We've been building an entire village there. We own 70 acres of land there. It's part of a resort, a residential resort that includes a downtown area with live-work areas, a very robust transient hotel or a resort product inside of it, but also a branded residential. So that's a place where you can come down and stay anywhere from 2 days a year to the rest of your life, put it in a rental pool. So you could do anything. So number one, it attracts because people are interested in owning a piece of the beautiful blue water overlooking the ocean, has a great rate of return, and has a variable, allows you to live in it as much as you or as little as you like. So has a great financial back end for people as well. So they can earn a great rate of return on it, and or they can decide to keep and stay in it all the time if they wish.
Yeah, I've toured the resort there in Belize personally, and it really is first class. And there's got to be exceedingly few places in the world for Americans where all those things line up like they do in Belize. It's a short flight from a lot of U.S. airports. It's English speaking. It's in the central time zone. And there's just really such undeveloped opportunity there. A lot of people likening Ambergris Caye, Belize to going back to Hawaii the way it was in the 1950s before it was built up and expensive. But that opportunity exists right there, right now in Belize, and you're capturing it.
It is. Developers like to come into, if we could find a place early on the program, that's what we believe Belize is. It's been rated as the #1 island by TripAdvisor 2 years in a row. I've traveled all over the world and looked at islands and started looking at this particular area over 10 years ago and liken it to what Cancun or Cabo or Key West or all of those areas were 30 years ago. And I kick myself that I didn't buy 30 years ago. I go and I look at a seaside in Florida, which was a groundbreaking resort that was built in Panhandle of Florida. When it originally sold, it was selling for just over $100 a square foot. Today, resales, if you can even find one in Seaside, are almost $2,000 a square foot. And so it really shows what's interesting for the developer and people who come into a market just as it starts to evolve, what the upside can be for them, particularly when it's well thought out and in a well-positioned economy.
You see so many more airlines now having direct routes to Belize City than they did previously, just going at an enormous rate. And the need for housing is just so much greater than what can be met with the supply there.
It is. And certainly with the financial landscape that changed over the last 8 years it's been a challenge. And so there's only a couple of people who are able to put it all together and meet that demand, which we've been fortunate up to this far to be able to go do to meet that demand of bringing new housing. But there's so many opportunities there. It's not just with what we're doing. As a market continues to grow, that means there's a requirement for housing for the locals, and there are more businesses. And so as markets take off, there's so many coming off of the bow of the ship, you know what I'm saying? Which is, there's so many opportunities. We need more food and beverage. You need laundry. You need, you just name it. Education, et cetera. So when you're in a market that's starting to expand, this market's gone and grown over 250% over the last 10 years.
Ambergris Caye, Belize.
Yes. And so when you start looking at that number of people coming in, there's so many opportunities for people to look at and go, well, I could open a dry cleaner down here. I was just talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago. He says, I'm going to come down and open a pool cleaning business down there, because there isn't one. It's all of a sudden, you know, there's so much when you get into new markets that are undeveloped. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, it's kind of the land of time forgotten. People are just starting to wake up to it. I can't believe all the opportunity that I see when I'm there in Ambergris Caye. How can my listeners find out more about what's going on in Ambergris Caye, Beth?
Well, one they could do is they could go to our website, which is mahoganybayvillage.com, and just sign up. Just share with us your email address, and we'll keep in touch with you, send you updates on what we're doing down there, and be happy to answer any of the questions that you might have.
Beth, I was a little bit surprised to find you apparently at home today when I talked to you here. It seems like you're always on a jet somewhere, and you're always in Belize whenever I go there. How often are you actually home?
People ask me where I live, and I say I live in 5C on American Airlines. But I probably travel 75 to 80% of the time.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that you landed long enough so that we could chat today. Where can my listeners find out more about you in general, Beth?
Well, go through Mahogany Bay. That's the best way to go to find me. And I'm happy to send a note if you'd like to us, and happy to arrange and help you in any way that I can.
Hey, well, thanks so much for coming on to Get Rich Education today, Beth Clifford.
Thank you, Keith. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.